Hi, everybody. Welcome to our panel session on video games, EU policy priorities, and the impact of COVID-19. I would like to thank Game, the German trade body, and the Kölnmesse for making the video game sector come together virtually this year. I am Head of Policy and Public Affairs at ISFE, the European trade body based in Brussels, and I will moderate this session. We will start with a presentation by Ipsos MORI, by Eduardo Mena, Research Director, and Nick Cook, Senior Research Executive, on the impact of COVID-19 on the video game sector and how players have been engaging with video games during the lockdown period. Following this, we will be joined by Dr. Tobias Miethaner, Director General, Digital Society at the Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. Dr. Miethaner will speak about Europe's ambitious recovery plan and about Germany's EU presidency priorities, because Germany is currently holding the EU presidency. Then Hendrik he is the president of the European Game Developers Federation and also the CEO of Remote Control Productions. Olaf Coenen, chairman of ISFE and vice president International Publishing at Electronic Arts, will share with us their perspective on which are the important topics to ensure growth and jobs during the recovery phase and beyond. To finish off, we will talk about the government plans in Germany for the video game sector, as it has allocated substantial funding to this growth sector. With this, I would like to say welcome to Eduardo Mena and Nick Cook, and we're looking forward to hearing about your insights.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Anne, for the introduction. My name is Eduardo Mena. I'm a research director at Ipsos MORI, and I'm going to share some of the key findings for the large research program that we run on behalf of ISFE. And we're going to talk about the state of play and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the video game industry as a whole in the main European countries. Just to start with, I would like just to introduce what GameTrack is about. GameTrack, as we understand the overall video game market as a whole, where players play on devices, either consoles, portable, smart devices, or computer, and the full detail of it, and how games flow through formats through every single kind of device. It could be consoles, it could be smartphones, and these formats are still very relevant in terms of the legacy package, which is still new and secondhand, app games that are just played through smart devices, and online video games which could be played amongst console, portables, and computers. The important thing is we understand the video game ecosystem as a whole. And we follow the market in terms of the reach and the number of players who interact with any of these devices at any time. So the number of players, in terms of engagement, what we understand as gaming time, and the time that the players devote to the full video game medium. And importantly, we follow the overall value and volume of acquisition of video games. We estimate and work quite closely with GSD, App Annie, to estimate the overall value of the market on every single game for every single device per country. We run this research across lots of different countries in the European continent. UK, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. The first half, I'm going to focus on the key findings for the first four: UK, France, Germany, and Spain, where we have data all the way down to 2012. And I'm going to share what is the status of the video game play in Europe. Just to start, since 2012, at that time, around 45% of the overall population used to play video games on any device. Every single year, every single quarter, we have seen this proportion of players changing, but in a long term increasing. For the last read, we have actually reported that more than half of the overall population across these four countries play video games, and that equals to around 54% of the overall population across these countries. It's an incredible increase of nearly 10 percentage points across the 8 years that we have been following the gaming market across these years. These increases are across the board and on every single country. In the UK, it had increased by around 13 percentage points and right now reached the overall incidence of video game reached around 57%. It's followed by Germany in terms of 52% of the population play games in the country, and that had increased by around 10 percentage points. And also important increases that we have seen in Spain, reaching 44% with increase from 8 percentage points. And the highest, but not the least, is France with around 61% of the overall population playing video games on this country and increasing also by 4 percentage points in this period. This 54% equals around 105 million players across these countries. And it's very important that the profile of the player has actually in some changes expanding and changing over these 8 years. In terms of gender, right now the player is more balanced in terms of males versus females, with a relation of 53% being males versus 47% being females. This is getting closer and closer as the time passes by. And in some countries like France, actually the profile of the players are slightly biased towards females at 51%. In terms of ages, we got all the numbers in terms of the number of players that we got from the 6 to the 64 years old in terms of population. 10 million players from around the 6 to 10, 11 to 14 for each individual age break. And then the base of players widened up to around 20 to 25 million players for each individual age break. The most important thing is the evolution that we have witnessed since 2012 to 2020. From 2012, we have around 18 million new players across these countries. And importantly, this evolution has actually helped to be the overall profile of the player to be more gender balanced, with around 10 million new players who are female and 8 million new players who are male. And in terms of ages, what we have seen is increasing and expanding the base of players for the over 15 to 64 years old. Particularly the 35 to 64, we have seen an increase of around 11 million players within the overall base from 2012 to 2020. From now on, I will pass on to Nick, who is going to tell you to some of the key insights in terms of the COVID impact on the video game industry.
Thank you very much, Ed. As Ed mentioned, we are now going to explore the relationship between video gaming and the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll start off with a bit of an overview about how engagement in gaming and video gaming has changed notably in the second quarter of 2020. Reach in playing video games has increased to 51% from 49% in Q2 2019. And as Ed mentioned, there are now 122 million gamers across the 5 game track markets. But we have also seen an increase in mean time spent playing video games, which now stands at 10.2 hours per week on average. This is understandable and is something we have seen throughout in-home entertainment research we have done at Ipsos MORI. Across TV, social media, and time spent online, people have been spending more and more hours on these mediums throughout lockdown, unsurprisingly. The lockdown has encouraged players to expand their experience across a range of devices. We have seen that a quarter of all have started playing on any device in the past 3 months. And this is also notable amongst smart devices, where 14% of people have started playing in the past 3 months. Again, most likely because of the device's accessibility. The lockdown has also seen an increased engagement across a range of video gaming activities. In our survey, we asked participants to tell us which activities they have been doing more or less since the start of lockdown. Amongst video game players, we can see that a quarter of those surveyed said that they were playing any video games more than before lockdown. But really interestingly here, we can see that 18% of players said they were playing video games online with friends, family, or other players more since the start of lockdown. And this is something we'll begin to explore later on in the presentation also. But engagement extends to other forms of video gaming related activities. 14% of players said they were either watching game streams or watching esports more since the start of lockdown. But as lockdown restrictions have eased, the proportion of players claiming they played more has reduced. So we can see on this graph that whilst in April, 19% of players claimed they were playing video games more versus pre-coronavirus, this dropped to 15% in June. This is consistent across markets with perhaps the exception of the UK, where we can see that it has plateaued through April and May, most likely due to the UK's later lockdown. But perhaps what we were most interested in understanding through this study was understanding how video games have played a role when it comes to both mental health and socialization during lockdown. Amongst all players, we can see that 32% claimed that playing video games had helped them feel happier during lockdown. And we can see that a quarter of those agreed that playing video games has helped them to stay connected with friends. But returning to this idea of multiplayer online players also, we can see that these scores are significantly higher amongst this audience. 49% claim that they agree with the statement playing video games has helped them feel happier, and 49% claim that playing video games has helped them stay connected with friends. This is understandable. Online video gaming platforms have played a significant role during lockdown as a point of socialization. We have seen platforms such as Fortnite hosting events such as movie nights and concerts that extend the parameters of these platforms beyond just video games. And we also did a bit of a deep dive into parents also and their relationship with video games during lockdown. Parents use video games more with their children, sharing time and making learning fun during lockdown. Again, looking at what parents said they were doing more of during lockdown, 20% claimed they were playing video games with their children more during lockdown, and 18% claimed they were playing educational video games with their children more during lockdown also. We can see this is notably higher amongst 6 to 10-year-olds, which is perhaps unsurprising considering the almost universal closing of schools across Europe during lockdown and having to keep these younger children engaged. This has also led to a shift in the perceptions of video gaming amongst this audience. 1 in 5 parents agree that video games helped with their child's education and schooling. And again, we can see this is slightly higher amongst 6 to 10-year-olds and significantly higher in the UK, where a quarter of parents who play video games claimed that playing video games had helped with their children's education and schooling. But perhaps most importantly in this study, we really wanted to understand the broad impact of video gaming's and mental health during the coronavirus pandemic. We wanted to understand how perceptions of video gaming and mental health had shifted and whether the 11 to 64-year-old population who we surveyed thought more favorably or less favorably of video gaming during this time. Amongst this whole audience, 1 in 5 claimed they felt more favorable towards video gaming and mental health. This is understandably higher amongst all players, with a quarter claiming they were more favorable about the relationship between video gaming and mental health. But then returning to multiplayer online players, who, as we already mentioned, already saw a positive impact of playing video games during lockdown, 35% now have a more favorable perception of video gaming and mental health, asserting this strong relationship. And amongst all parents also, we see this shift in perception, with 24% of all parents claiming they now have a more favorable perception of video gaming and mental health. So, how has the video gaming industry evolved, and what will coronavirus and the fallout mean for video gaming? The video gaming is stronger and more relevant than ever, reaching 122 million across the 5 markets we have discussed today. And the video game audience is also diversifying and introducing wider and different audiences to video gaming. There are now more female players and now more older players than there were back in 2012, indicating a diverse and broad range of players. But importantly, with coronavirus, lockdown has encouraged players to discover video games across multiple devices. Multiplayer online video gaming in particular has helped with mental health and played a supportive role during lockdown, not only personally, but also through socialization. Parents have also found value in playing video games with their children, and also to facilitate learning, and we see increasing links between different spheres when it comes to video gaming. So what does this mean looking ahead? Well, we have seen how video gaming has had a positive impact during coronavirus among the different audiences and can signal a wider shift in the perception of video gaming looking ahead. Thanks very much for your time.
I would like to thank Ipsos MORI for their presentation, and they will be with us for the Q&A session at 2:30 today. That was quite some impressive insight on the societal impact of video games during the lockdown period. And I would like to kick off this panel talk with turning to our two industry representatives, to Hendrik and to Olaf, to see what is your reaction on the findings just presented by Ipsos MORI. Hendrik, does this data we have just seen, does that tell the full story of the ecosystem? And how have smaller developers coped during this period? And what are your takeaways for the crucial months and years to come?
So to make it rather easy, is during the lockdown, of course, more people played games, basically play sessions and so on, grew quite a bit. But the games which actually grew in revenue and in awareness were the ones already established. People were joining the games of their friends. I think that's pretty obvious. You're not really there to discover stuff on your own. You go and socialize with your friends. So especially the already established and the big games were here the benefactors. On the other hand, the ones who had it and still have it way more tougher are the smaller ones, and the ones who had, let's say, bad timing in their production cycle. So if you just finished a game during that time or started, that's all kind of tough because, if you just release, COVID was basically dominating the media and a lot of other topics. So you basically had no chance to break through. So what we've seen in the data is that a lot of the small and medium size have issues doing business development. So they don't fear today, but they fear tomorrow. And a lot of the bigger ones already established actually benefited from this in regards to revenue. Some had really nice uptakes of 200, 250%. But again, this is just a very few companies and games. Of course, those are the ones being reported about, but not so much about the thousands of smaller ones. And sorry, Anne, go ahead.
Thank you, Hendrik. I would now like to turn to Olaf. Olaf, you're presenting as some of the major European video game companies and global video game companies. And some of them have also seen, of course, what Hendrik just said. They have seen their sales rise also during the period of the lockdown. How do you think, how have the bigger players supported the smaller ones that have struggled more? And where do you see the synergies in the future for the ecosystem?
Yeah, let me maybe first, on the back of the presentation that we just saw, say that I think we as an industry overall have seen the uptick in gaming in a very humble and responsible way. I mean, on the one hand, yes, more people were playing. Yes, more people were spending. But at the same time, that on the back of a global pandemic. And that's what no one is happy about. And that's just something that we should acknowledge. And that's where I think this industry has also shown up in a responsible way, thinking of how do we actually work with key stakeholders in markets to ensure that it's understood where gaming can actually help to connect people while being in lockdown, while not being with their friends, but at the same time doing that in a responsible way. And that's what our data actually shows us. And I can tell you from my own experience as a father of 4, to see how my boys were actually playing with their friends without actually being with them in the same room during the lockdown period and during the working from home or schooling at home, was actually quite encouraging to see what we as an industry, with all our connectivity, we can bring to the table. In terms of the bigger companies and the smaller companies, while I don't have a breakdown of who all participated and actually saw their numbers go up, I would say that in an industry where the great games always will break through, any company has similar chances to do so. And in the last days, I think we saw an amazing breakthrough from a game called Fall Guys, if anyone was following that, which is the newest hype in the moment. So that was actually quite encouraging to see that it's not always just the big ones that are breaking through, but if you have the right ideas, there are a lot of opportunities. Now, if the industry is growing, and we have been growing as an industry for the past years, and I expect that there will be growth in this year as well, that of course will benefit all parties. And the bigger ones are definitely working with the smaller studios to also contribute to their games portfolios.
Thank you both, Hendrik Lesser and Olaf Coenen, for your insight and for your various, your different and various perspective on this. I think the solidarity there that we heard that Hendrik mentioned on how the sector has come together virtually to support each other is something that is really important. Dr. Miethaner, thank you so much for being with us today during a very busy German presidency. I do not think that everybody knows this, but Germany has developed a video game to promote Europe's cultural diversity during its presidency. It is called Pathways. I'd strongly advise everybody to try it out. It's available on the German EU presidency website and also on the Google Store and on the App Store. So I think this is very nice for us as representatives for the video game industry, and having a panel about this today. It's great to see that Germany has chosen that medium in order to promote Europe's cultural diversity. Dr. Miethaner, the German presidency is taking place at a crucial moment of Europe's history. The EU member states, with Germany also in the driving seat, have adopted an unprecedented budget of 1.85 trillion euros in order to support Europe's recovery. Together for Europe's recovery, it's actually the motto during Germany's presidency. The creative and culture industries, of which video games are part, has been identified as one of the 14 ecosystems by the European Commission for Europe's industrial strategy and also for the recovery plan. So I have two questions for you. The first question is, how will this big recovery plan actually play out at national level? I think this is a question that many industries and also the video game sector is asking themselves. So if you could give us a very brief overview on that, that would be helpful. And then my second question is for you. We have seen the European Commission presenting its very ambitious work program at the start of this year, before the outbreak of COVID-19, which includes a strategy for data, a strategy for artificial intelligence, a digital education action plan, gender equality, and also, of course, very importantly, a strategy to tackle the climate crisis. That are only a few of the big initiatives that's been put on the table. So what are the priorities that Germany will drive during its presidency? That will especially be of importance for our sector, for the video game sector?
Well, as you said, thank you. COVID is a challenge that, is hardly to tackle within a few weeks and months. So the presidency as such is a challenge enough for a member state to handle, also for Germany. And now in a very short time, we have to think how we can overcome this crisis and what we can contribute to get on as good and as fast as possible. I think it's too early to exactly say how the European recovery program will work in practice. As you said, the video game sector has been identified as one of the sectors which will be very much in the focus also of the aid programs. What I can say is that in Germany, we already started funding a program which helps any enterprises against bankruptcy, and of course, this also applies on businesses which are part of the video game sector. But as I said, we do not already know what the the consequences of the recovery program will be, especially for the video game sector. I think for what is very important for us is something that already has been mentioned, which is also part of the video game sector, namely the fact that we see that we cannot that we have to make sure that our life goes on when we are at home, so that we are able to do everything that we can do when we are in the office, that we can do that from at home as well. And this is something which is very relevant also for me, because we are also responsible for the rollout of digital infrastructure in Germany. And COVID showed us how important it is to have a gigabit networks for everyone. So home office must be available for everyone. And this is something which is a very important learning for us, that we cannot rely on the connectivity that was maybe enough in the past years, but we have to keep up and get on very quickly to get gigabits to everybody. And in this context, I think from the European perspective, it's very important to have European sovereignty. Every one of us knows the discussions about the security of 5G networks and so on. And insofar, this is also a topic that we think is very important for the next months to be fixed. So this is the part of the digital infrastructure. I think you already mentioned the topic of data strategy of the European Commission. This for sure is one of the most important fields that we see where we want to be active. We have in Germany, we are just trying to build up a Mobilitätsdatenraum, as we call it, so mobility data room. And this is something which we also find in the European Commission's policy, in the data strategy. And we want to support that and make sure that the usage of data is being enhanced. We think that we in Germany, we are a little bit too restrictive, or also in Europe, to be more precise, very restrictive in the use of data. And our policy is to make sure how can we better make use of data, of weather data. We have Sentinel data, but of course, a lot of other data categories. And this is something that we want to push also in the field of the data strategy. And a third example could be artificial intelligence. I think that we should not concentrate only on how can we get the economy stabilized, but also how can we use the lot of money that is being put on the table to make Europe future-proof. And therefore, we also should think how we can use artificial intelligence to get on in this field. And as far as the German recovery program is concerned, 2 billion euros have been made available, especially for the field of artificial intelligence. So I think this is something that we also should consider. How can we strengthen our future technologies? And this is valid for artificial intelligence as well as for the video game sector, I think.
Thank you very much for outlining those priorities. Indeed, the European data strategy and artificial intelligence are two very important topics for the video game sector. Without data, there are simply no video games. It's absolutely crucial to have a balanced regulatory framework and a strategy for data. So thank you very much for sharing the German priorities with us. Hendrik Lesser, as the president of EGDF, and also working with these issues on a day-to-day on a day-to-day business perspective through your work as a CEO of remote control productions. If you could pick 2 topics that you believe that Europe should deliver on for the developers community, what would those be?
Those 2 topics would be, and also building on what was just said, one is trade policy. Data is, of course, important. We had the introduction of GDPR a couple of years ago, which is on the one hand side great for the consumer and for the individual protection of data and so on, but it needs to be realistic that we can still do business. And in regards to trade policy, of course, Europe is not isolated. So we have China, India, the US, and so on, who have kind of a protectionistic approach on digital markets. And we have all kinds of issues there. I think we're all aware that Apple is going to change some of their policies in regards to data, which at first, again, sounds great for the consumer, but is disrupting mobile games at the same time, and how advertisers do business on Apple. That's definitely something which is relevant to all of us. So I think the EU has to, on the one hand side, always keep iterating on the regulation, make it on the one hand side business friendly, but also protect the individual users. And on the other side, and that's even more important, to have a counterbalance to China and the US. And the second one is like, I always keep saying the last couple of months that now we are in the digital revolution because of COVID. I think, yes, the EU, Germany, and so on, a couple of other countries realized the power of games, let's say, quite early on. But let's say, from my perspective as an entrepreneur, we could have acted way faster. And I think it's pretty obvious the last couple of months that we should have. So not dwelling too much in the past, I think it's very important that in regards to modernize and not only protect and help companies which are struggling now, which is a fair cost because we just need to keep and save some jobs right now to stabilize the economy again. But I think it's very vital that we especially invest into future topics, and game has been a future topic for decades. And I think we not only have to double down, we have to quadruple down on games, because games is not just an entertainment business. It is a culture technique, and using the culture technique in education, in Germany now using games to represent what their presidency is about. So I think everybody here in the audience gets it. Games is like a film was more than 100 years ago, can be used for all kinds of purposes. And I think it's really high time that we understand this fully, that all the basically public support programs are going into this as holistic as possible. So when we talk about AI, that's great, but there's other topics too. And again, we need this kind of 360 approach to this. If something like this ever happens again, we have to be prepared much better. And one example is the schools and universities and such.
Thank you for that, Hendrik. That's indeed very important things. Olaf, do you agree with Hendrik? And are there additional areas where you see it's important for Europe's policymakers to tackle in order to manage the huge recession that Europe will be facing in the coming years? And where would the opportunities lie for growth and job creation? And where would the challenges lie for that?
Yeah, I do agree with everything that Hendrik said. And I would actually add 2 topics from my side to that, where I believe it's really important that we work closely with the policymakers, both on the national level as well as on the international or European level. Those 2 areas are how skills, education, and gender equality are crucial for Europe's future, and actually the potential that we as a video games industry can actually bring to Europe's recovery, which is something that, of course, we will all need to focus on in the months and years to come. So let me talk about the skills, education, and gender equality first. Europe and the von der Leyen Commission are clearly recognizing the importance of education, skills, and gender equality. These are absolutely crucial, not only for the video game sector, but for all of Europe. And as a father of 2 girls and 2 boys, I would add actually for generations to come. And Europe has talent and an enormous innovation potential. But the video games sector is currently facing a skills gap when it comes to this. We have to close that gap and we have to continue to advance in that area so Europe remains attractive as an innovation and creation hub. Let me give you an example. The games industry often requires very specialized skill set. That drastically narrows the talent pool that we actually have. So the UK trade body, UKI, did a survey with video game developer companies, and actually 74% of those companies said that they are having real difficulties finding skilled staff for their development studios. If you compare that with other ICT areas across Europe, the average is at 40%. So we are having even a harder time in the games industry finding qualified staff than maybe other technology and entertainment areas do. So what do we need? We need computational skills. They must be part of the fundamental skills, not something that is niche and specific in terms of computer science classes. We need to really broaden this out. And I personally believe with all the bad things that happened over the past months, at least from an education point, we made a big leap forward by actually having the lockdown and having schools step up and actually teachers stepping up and connecting our kids. And that's something that we need to now build on. So coding classes are needed, and that at an early age, and not only for boys, but really widen this out for a broad audience. Initiatives like the EU Code Week are a great example of something that we are already doing on the European level, and we should do more of that. And also video games can help, and it's fantastic. I actually just downloaded it, and I will show later to my kids the game that was developed here in Germany on Europe. Those are the right initiatives, and Poland just recently even included a game as part of the required national curricula for all schools. So that's the thinking where you capture people's minds and capture the kids in a way that they really engage with the content, as well as working on the skill set that we need as an industry eventually if they want to ever join us. Next to the schools, we need support for non-formal education. So summer camps, youth clubs, game jams. And I would say our North American counterparts are a bit more advanced when it comes to these. So I would love to see more of these initiatives in Europe as well. And of course, we need to train the educators and the teachers in the same way. They need to also step up in order to speak with the same language that the kids do that might already be working on their first apps for the App Store. And eventually that is not only the teachers, but it's actually for the overall workforce. So we need to think about lifelong education to upskill the workforce and also see transferring workforce from one area of an industry into the games industry. So next to the skills education agenda, we must also drive gender equality. Today, women represent only 30% of the workforce in the digital sector in Europe. And we are not doing better on the game side, to be frank. From national surveys, we're currently seeing that about 28% of the workers in the video games sector are female. So we definitely need to improve also as a games industry. And it's great that the EU Skills Agenda has focused action to attract girls and women into STEM studies, which is super important. We actually know from data that we have that girls who play video games have a much higher propensity to actually go into STEM courses, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics courses. And there's definitely something to think about. And it's not only, of course, on the European level, but it's also on the national level. And we really applaud what's happening in countries like Germany and the UK. For example, in Germany, the trade body launched the initiative Hier spielt Vielfalt. And in the UK, there is Raise the Game. And we, of course, know that the German government is actively supporting the development of games with a dedicated fund, which is fantastic. At EA, to talk a little bit about the company that I'm coming from, diversity and inclusion is a big part of our DNA and something that is really close to everyone's work. And we do quite a lot in order to drive that. So give you an example, we have 7 different employee resource groups focused on diversity and inclusion. They connect employees across functions and across regions. So just for perspective, in Europe, EA has thousands of employees, and these resource initiatives are actually working with these employees in order to drive diversity. For example, when it comes to Black, Asian, and minority ethnic students in the gaming industry. We just recently had a big event around this, which was called Your Future, Your Ambition event in London, where we brought in over 1,000 students to get interested not only in gaming, but actually to get interested in STEM careers. So skills, education, and gender equality are tremendously important. But you also asked me about if I have a second area, and the second area is the video game sector per se. I think we have to acknowledge that we will go through the worst recession in Europe and in the respective markets since World War II. That's just going to be the facts that we have to face. And simply going back to how we worked before COVID will not give us a head start in Europe. So actually now is the time to double down on future industries that have growth potential. And the games industry has shown growth in Europe constantly since 2014. We have grown 55% in that time. And we actually are an industry that is capable of building and delivering pure digital products during lockdown and working from home. All our studios on the global level are currently working from home. All our commercial teams and marketing teams are working from home. And it is literally working. So while other industries face huge logistically and market headwinds, we actually believe that our industry can deliver during these critical times. And at the same time, we see that there's great demand and also a great social benefit from the presentation that we saw at the beginning of actually having games delivered to millions of players out there. So for the next 12 months, I think we should support the games industry wherever we can with initiatives like we have here in Germany with a dedicated program of 50 million getting behind the games industry. But also the Europe's recovery plan should drive the growth and drive and create jobs in small and in bigger companies across Europe. If I want to point at one country that has done really, really good in that area in the past, it's actually Canada. They have succeeded in attracting major investments in video games and tech. And they did this by actually providing the lowest business cost infrastructure and the lowest tax burden among the G7 countries. It's roughly 10 to 12% below other countries. So while I believe we have top talent, we have great opportunities, we have the cultural diversity that is so important to drive games development, there's a lot we can do together with the policymakers to actually come out of this crisis even stronger and make Europe the hub for video games development. Then I think we will make our contribution to driving economic growth in Europe.
Thank you, Olaf. Wow, Hendrik, Olaf, I think we have a list or a full-fledged strategy on how the video game sector can be one of the motors for Europe. So thank you for sharing your vision with us during this panel on this. For Dr. Tobias Miethaner, and any comments from your side on what you have just heard from Hendrik Lesser and Olaf Coenen before I ask you about the plans for the video game sector, more specifically in Germany?
Well, I think what Olaf just said is very important. I think you said lots of things which are very important and true. But I think especially the latter one was very important, namely that the video game sector is one which is future-proof and which shows at the especially at this time, at the time of the crisis, that it can contribute to keep our businesses running and to make sure that we have a sector which has a lot of potential for the future. And as I said before, maybe we should not only think about how to prevent bankruptcy of enterprises, which is of course a very important aspect, but also to think about how can we use the money that we are investing now to strengthen future proof sectors. And the video game sector definitely is one of these sectors.
Thank you. So Germany is one of Europe's member states that has really recognized video games as an important sector of the economy. And it's allocated 15 million euros in support to video game development. And that is huge in comparison to, for instance, the Creative Europe program that is managed by the European Union. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the plans for the video game sector in Germany, and in particular around this funding?
Yes, well, in Germany we started with activities on the federal side some years ago. So we have not a very long tradition on that. So some federal states are very active in the sector for a longer time, like Bavaria, North Rhine-Westphalia, and Berlin. But in the last years, we saw that we also have to help from the federal government. And the first thing that we did was to sponsor the German Games Award. But this was only a first step. And as you said, now the more important topic is that we can start our funding programs. And we have been fighting for that for a very long time. And there are a lot of also members of parliament which are helping us. Of course, our minister, Andreas Scheuer, is very much interested in the game sector, but also in the chancellery, Minister Becker. So we have very important politicians which are driving this topic. And we started with the first phase of the funding program last year. We did a pilot funding, and we said, okay, we are funding projects with an amount of maximum 200,000 euros. And the result was really overwhelming. 380 projects applied for this financial grant. And of course, we could not subsidize every one of those. But at the moment, we have more than 200 of these projects which we grant money. And now, and this is even more important, our minister has announced the step 2, so the phase where we will subsidize also the prototypes and the game production, where we also have, where we will grant even more money. And we will have 250 billion euro for the next 5 years, so 50 million every year. And this, of course, will help us to strengthen the video game sector in Germany. But of course, as we are also talking about the European perspective today, we hope that we can help that we will have a European ecosystem on video games. France is very active already in this field. And we think that it is important to build up an ecosystem which can compete with others. You mentioned Canada. I think this is something which is also where we want to get in the next years. So we think this is a future-proof sector. We want to invest a lot of money, and we are very happy if lots of projects apply for state money. And we are very happy that we can start now. And I think the players in the market also are very happy that they can get subsidies as well now.
Thank you very much. That sounds very, very promising, and it's great to hear that Germany is such a motor in this area, and will also, as we learned from you, working together also with France on that in order to further enhance the sector. Perhaps to those that are listening to the panel, Dr. Miethaner, if you're a company, what should you do in order to get involved in and submit a project? Should you go to the German trade body for advice? Are there any recommendations you can give?
That's definitely a good idea. I think if you go to games, they have the knowledge what we are doing. They know the market in Germany, of course. So this is definitely a body where you should go to. At the same time, I think the first step would be that you have a closer look on what the framework of our funding scheme is. And we will also provide webinars and so on to make life easier for those who want to apply for the subsidy programs. And then we will, in the next weeks, also provide for the necessary paperwork, or the paperwork is maybe not the right expression. So the what you need to go for the subsidy.
To apply. Okay, that sounds
exactly.
great. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for that also very, very practical insight. With this, I would like to give a big thank you to our three panelists for their contribution. I think we're very grateful to you, Dr. Tobias Miethaner, to have heard about the recovery plan. We understand that better. I'd like to thank Hendrik Lesser, Olaf Coenen for their insight and sharing their perspective. And with this, I would like to thank you all for logging in and for having joined our panel session. Thank you.